Expelled from Uganda is my debut novel. I've only written sort of a poem before, previously published in an anthology, so this is quite a large-scale project for me. It's basically a memoir that's been written as narrative fiction. It's a memoir that's based, well, on my father's experiences, so it's his memoir as such. And it's all about his journey from Uganda. So Dad was actually a Ugandan expat. So in 1972 there was a huge historical event that doesn't tend to get much light shed on it for some reason, but basically what happened was Idi Amin, who was the president of Uganda at the time, he decided to expel 80,000 Asians. They were given an expulsion order of 90 days to pretty much pack up their things and leave. So as you can imagine, 90 days to pack up your whole life, my goodness, it's, you know, such a difficult thing to do. It's just to think of that, just to imagine that in itself, it's a very terrifying thought. And that really hit home. And I thought to myself, how would I have coped as a 19-year-old? It's just impossible to even think about how, you know, just to start thinking about how you would cope with that scenario. My goodness, I just don't know. But that for me was the defining moment, and I thought, right, that's it. So I rang him the next morning. I got on the phone and I said, Dad, I can't believe you went through this. And he giggled a little bit and he said, you know about this though? And I said, yes, but I didn't know enough. That was just, it was incredible, Dad. We've got to get this down on paper. And he said, right, okay. I'm happy for you to do that. If you'd like to do that, I'm ready to share. He did have like a little suitcase which was like a time capsule that I opened up, and he was sharing a lot of the sort of documentation as part of his journey. There was things like one particular item was a little booklet about how to settle in Britain, and it was written in Gujarati, which is like, you know, one of the many languages that were spoken by the Indian community. I remember sort of looking at, there was little infographics of, you know, how to sort of live life in Britain and how to, you know, British etiquette and things like that really. There was lots of other documentation, things like tickets and lots of photographs, again more memories than anything else. So the biggest challenge was really just drawing from, you know, the verbal conversations that we had and the interviews that I had with him, pretty much like this, where I'd sit him down and say, Dad, tell me all about this. Again, it was about catching him on the right day as well. I was very sort of mindful of, you know, sort of triggers and things like that. So where I felt it was getting a little bit too difficult for him, I would sort of hang back and say, right, Dad, I think that's enough for today. We'll move on another day. So yeah, we've gone through chapter by chapter as we've been sort of, you know, as I've been writing and editing. I think he's happy. He's very happy, and he can't wait to sort of read it all in one go. It's been very sort of ad hoc, you know, odd chapter by chapter where I've sort of shared it. But then we've had some really emotional chapters where he's sort of stopped at the end and we've had tears, and he's sort of said, that's amazing, how did you bring that to life? But it's taken a lot of prodding and poking and constant firing of questions. What colour was this? How did that look? What was the texture of this? You know, there was so much detail that had gone into that, so I needed that detail in there. Thankfully, I think I've been very lucky. I managed to get the right people to help me with the project, help me cultivate it in the right direction, without losing any authenticity as well, because that was one of my biggest kind of hurdles. It was just sticking to the authenticity of it and getting enough information from my dad to make it sort of, you know, as real as it was back then. I think that was a really important point for me. I think one of the things that I want to achieve from this is to get people thinking about their family history, their heritage, and passing that on to generations. It's so important to know those stories and pass them on, you know, as authentically as we can to our children. And I wouldn't have thought that way had I not have had my daughter. I don't think I would have thought, you know, my thought process wouldn't have been the same. But I think after having my little one, I needed her to know what her grandfather went through. That was so important. I think the next step is I'm looking at possibly doing some fiction. I didn't plan to do a memoir, but I think writing it as narrative fiction has led me nicely into the fiction realm. So I really do hope to do some more fiction in the future. I don't think this is the end for me. It literally is just the beginning. I've enjoyed the journey so much, and I look forward to writing many more books.